Okay, so welcome everybody to meeting number 4 of the Lansing Parks, Recreation and Trails Master Plan Committee. So I am just going to start with a quick roll call, and then we'll jump into the agenda, and I'll share my screen at that point. Actually, I'll share my screen now. Just give me 1 second. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So in terms of a roll call, Deborah Trumbull,
Yep.
Ronnie Hardaway,
Here.
Nice
Jack Young.
chair, Ron.
Jack Young's here.
And then from the town, we have Jenna Holler,
Yes.
Pat Terrell,
Yes.
and CJ. No, I thought I saw her there.
Yep, I'm here. I'm here.
All
I'm just
right.
muted. Hi, everybody.
And then from Place Alliance, we have Ian Law and Josiah Simpson, and from MJ, Andrew Gilchrist and Jackie Hicks.
Hello, the fidgety one over here. Apparently.
So with that, we'll go into the agenda. So for today, we're going to start with just a brief project schedule update. And then we'll go into a public engagement recap. Since the last time we met, we have had some various engagement activities that I think many here have been a part of. So let's do a recap of that and some highlights. And then we'll dive into the main event of the discussion, which is a discussion of the preliminary draft concept plans for Myers Park, Ludlowville, and Salt Point. And so Ian and Josiah will walk us through those. And then we'll walk through some ideas for additional park improvements and then next steps. So
hey, Andrew, just a quick correction, not Ludlowville, right?
Did I say?
The ball field.
I meant the town ball fields.
Yeah.
And you know, it's so funny. I heard ball field.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Ian.
Teamwork.
Yeah. All right. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jackie for a project schedule update.
Sure. All right. Well, thanks everybody. It's great to be back with you. And as Andrew said, there's a lot that we want to share with you today. So I'll quickly go over the schedule. You can see highlighted in red where we are here in March. And so here we are having another committee meeting. We've also been conducting stakeholder interviews, group discussions over the course of this month, and Andrew will share a little bit about that. One thing we did want to touch base with you on is the shifting of some of the engagement further out. So those items that are circled in red, we are proposing, and we have discussed this with Pat and CJ, shifting those engagement activities out a little bit so that we can get through the discussion of preliminary concepts and ideas as they're taking shape with this group, and then present those to the public through hopefully in May, and we'll see, maybe it's the beginning of June, in-person pop-up tables and information tables at the parks. You know, another public workshop, if that needs to be virtual, we can certainly host that virtual. If there's opportunities perhaps to have some in-person again at a park, we want to have that flexibility. So we're recommending kind of shifting that engagement, which would then shift the presentation of this effort to the board a little bit. And we certainly can be flexible with that to make sure that it is the most appropriate, step to be engaging the public. But we want to make sure that this committee is comfortable with the concepts prior to taking that out to the public. So that's just the point that we wanted to make. And if there's any comments or questions about that, we'll certainly gladly entertain them. Okay. So we are continuing in terms of other tasks that are ongoing, and these are concurrent tasks. Continuing to update the existing conditions. We have just integrated in an ADA assessment that our ADA specialists here in-house have conducted for all of the parks. So that's getting integrated into the existing conditions. The past plan reviews, obviously the public engagement is ongoing. And Andrew will talk a little bit about how the stakeholder discussions are ongoing. And then the preliminary draft concepts, as we will be discussing. The online survey and the first public workshop we've already completed, as you know.
All right, so moving into the next agenda item. So this is just a quick public engagement recap. Part of the reason why we want to bring this up is one, because they've occurred since the last time we met, so we just want to provide an update. But this also, the information that we've gathered throughout the public engagement process, starting with the online community survey, discussions with all of you, but also the virtual public workshop and the stakeholder meetings. The information that we've gathered from these exercises are what help to form the foundation of the plan and also the concepts that we're going to be discussing in just a moment. So this is just a reminder of some of the highlights that we've learned. So we had the virtual public workshop #1 held virtually on February 25th, and also the stakeholder meeting, which on March 4th to the 8th, which I'll discuss in just a sec. So in terms of the public workshop, again, this was held virtually via Zoom webinar. And it was a virtual breakout discussion format focused on each park. Many of the folks on this call took part in that, and we were really happy with the outcome of that and of the participation. So approximately 60 people had pre-registered and about 40 participated. This turned out to be a great number of people to have nice group discussions with. Some of the common themes that came out from this, and again, these are kind of park-wide. We won't get into each individual park. We do have a summary available of that, as well as the recordings available. But some of the common themes that we heard throughout is better connectivity, both between the parks, but also between other community resources. Better pedestrian and bicycle amenities, again, both within the parks, so people can utilize those spaces in the parks, but also between the parks and between various different areas of the town. We heard a lot about the need for improved parking and restroom facilities, and also a need for additional community and recreation spaces. Next, I'll talk about the stakeholder meetings. So over at the beginning of this month, we held 6 topic-based stakeholder meetings. Of those that we reached out to, we've spoken to about 20 of them through those group meetings. One of the things that's really great about these stakeholder meetings is that they really create an opportunity for collaboration and networking. So when we invite these folks, many may know each other, many may have worked with each other in the past, but some people are meeting each other for the first time and realize that, oh, they actually have areas of overlap in the types of work that they do, and it might help to create those connections. Maybe there's an event that someone can collaborate on. Maybe there's some resource that someone didn't know about. And so this really provides an opportunity for collaboration, which really comes in handy during the implementation phase of the master plan, when it comes time for relationship building and partnerships to help actually implement the projects that are recommended. And then we did not speak, we weren't able to speak to everyone that we reached out to, but there are still some key stakeholders that we want to make sure that we reach. And so we will be reaching out to additional stakeholders, in the coming weeks and couple of months, just to make sure that we've heard from everybody that's been identified.
And I just want to point out the photo here, in case you haven't noticed, is one of our discussions with park staff. Pat, we should have told Owen to smile for this one. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
That's a great face. Yeah.
He's deep in thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these are the stakeholder groups that, the topic-based stakeholder groups that we spoke with. So it included park staff, as you saw in that picture, parks recreation, and trail maintenance and programs, regional partners, recreation groups, tourism and business, and education and nonprofit. And we are in the process right now of summarizing all of the feedback that we heard, so that will be made available to you. In the meantime, if anyone would like to hear any of the discussion, we did record them all. We aren't going to be posting the recordings publicly of these, just because some of the folks might not want that to be publicly available, but the summary will be made. The summaries of all these conversations will be made publicly available on the website. But in the meantime, if anyone wants to learn more, just shoot me an email and I can send you a link to the meeting recordings. So some of the common themes, and again, these will look familiar as to the common themes we heard during the public meeting, and that's a good thing. That means that we're starting to hear, once we start to hear the same issues and opportunities over and over again, that gives us a clear indication of sort of the direction that the plan needs to go in. So some of the common themes that we heard include need for additional community gathering spaces, better connectivity, parking and restrooms, need for additional park staff, pedestrian improvements, and then I don't remember what that last one was for. Well, if we figure it out, we'll come back to it. Oh, the point there was what I started with, was that what we had heard from the stakeholders confirmed what we had been hearing from the public. There we go. I'm like, wait, what was that for? Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the public engagement thus far? Great. So moving ahead to kind of the main event here, I am going to pass it along to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen in just a moment and pass it over to Ian and Josiah. And they are going to walk us through. Yes, they're going to walk us through the concept plan. So I'm just going to stop sharing, and Ian and Josiah, take it away.
All right, guys, hold on. I'm going to start sharing. What's up? All right. So let me get myself organized here to annotate. Yeah, we're good. All right. So we got to have some fun over the past few weeks, kind of gathering all the information and the feedback that we've received thus far, and take a first pass at Myers Park, Salt Point, and the town ball fields, which again was a lot of fun. We're going to start with Myers Park. I'm going to spend the others are, I think, a lot more straightforward. Myers, I think there's a lot of things to get through and consider. And so we'll take a little bit of time just talking about the existing condition and some of the observations that I think we've expressed in the past, but I think really helped shape the direction that we took with this first initial pass. The first thing that, stuck out to us, both having visited and studied the park, and then throughout this kind of information gathering, is, the park is certainly vehicularly oriented right now. A lot of spaces dedicated to the car, so from the initial, the primary loop through the park, out to the marina, which really includes all of those areas, as well as the secondary loops to the north, and then even allowing access kind of out to the point. When we layer in that plus, I'll use a different color here to kind of highlight the parking, which in some ways kind of really kind of wraps. I'm being real messy and fast here, just to demonstrate the point. But in general, we've got 4,150 linear feet, almost, it's shy of a mile, but over 3/4 of a mile of waterfront that you have on this really spectacular property, right? But only about 23% of that, 950 linear feet of it, doesn't have auto access. So, what's that tell us? It means that both, visually, there's very few spots in the park. You really have to kind of get to the beach or out to the point where you can visually experience the water without looking through a car, right? Almost every single spot you're at within the park, experience the water visually, you've got a vehicle in your view. And then of course, physically, that's also cutting off the lakefront, and it's also kind of cutting off pedestrian connectivity from the amenities within the park. So to get from most of the amenities within the park, you're sort of forced to negotiate vehicular use areas, which, when you add those things up, we believe is an erosion of the potential park experience that, ideally, we would want to maximize that waterfront real estate to the greatest extent possible, and free it from the car to the greatest extent practical. And so that's kind of the balance that we are hoping to strike. And so coming from that as sort of a baseline observation, we said, philosophically, if this was a blank site, if it was a blank canvas, and you said, we want to develop a master plan for this site, we want to have a marina with a boat launch. Be great if the boat launch could have about 75 truck and trailer parking, and we want to maintain about 180 spots for cars, which the site currently has. It only has about 15 boat trailer parking. And we want to have all the elements that it currently has. 19 RV lots, a gazebo, 7 different pavilions, basketball, volleyball, new kayak racks and access, all those things, what would we do? And before I switch to the concept plan, right away, for again, as an outsider and evaluating this site, the RV park is up against the railroad track. So that's where you'd start, like what's kind of backing up there, but it does have a little bit of waterfront along Salmon Creek. So that's, that's a good spot for that if it's going to stay, right? So, we understand how important the RV park is from a revenue generation spot. So at least for this pass, we've maintained the RV park in that general location. And so then thinking about if we had to accommodate those kind of vehicular uses, is there a way we can consolidate them in a place that is less valuable real estate on this site? And that brings us to this zone, up against another kind of shipyard zone over here. You know, the reality is we've got 180 cars to park, and we've got a goal of 75 boat trailers that we'd like to handle on site. And so they've got to go somewhere, and we want to reclaim a lot of valuable real estate that's currently given up to the car. So with that, I will jump to the concept plan. And again, this is just a first pass. We're trying to make kind of a big, bold move. I don't want to get kind of caught up in the details because I think it's about the bigger ideas. And then once we get that feedback, we can start to kind of hone in on specifics. But in this first move, we wanted to, as an exercise, take a look at what if we used all of the existing, basically all the existing pathways that are, or the existing roadways now, and turn that back into a pathway. And we consolidated, we basically took away all the interior parking on the park and we consolidated it. We took away the parking around the marina. I've been a boater my whole life, so I've been to lots of marinas, and you know, never have I seen the ability to park right up next to your boat like you have here. So having, you know, just making folks walk a little bit, I do think is, as long as they have a spot they can, you know, get their boat in and out and have a convenient space to park, I think it can still work great. And then you can reclaim that valuable real estate back as like a park feature for the people using the park. So that's the big idea here is, what does it look like if we were to sacrifice what I would consider kind of the least valuable real estate within the park to consolidate all the vehicular use areas, or at least the primary vehicular use areas, and reclaim all of that lakefront to the people using the park. We did provide, this is the existing road that comes in. So we just kind of turned it into a drop-off for kayaks and canoes, relocating the canoe kayak trailer kind of over here, the locker, and then with the potential for a formalized canoe kayak launch somewhere in that vicinity. And essentially, you know, what we're showing here is basically the exact same road alignment of that main loop around the primary green space, just giving it a little bit of an asphalt diet, just a little saw cut and removal and planting some grass back, maybe down to 10 feet, whatever we felt comfortable enough for the park vehicle, park staff vehicles to be able to drive on it and monitor it. But there's a lot of excess pavement if, you know, if we kind of take away vehicles from penetrating that deep into the park. And then, you know, this currently there's a secondary road that runs this whole length out there. All of that could get converted again into a nice creek walk path along with opportunities for seating, etc. As you can see, we've then just sort of just added some formal walking paths that link everything so that all of the different elements within the park are truly accessible. It's a nice flat site, so it's, from a grading standpoint, that part's easy. You know, and it could be a combination of, you know, your primary walkways could stay asphalt if that was a material that the park department felt would be the easiest to maintain. Maybe some of the secondary or tertiary walkways could be a compacted stone dust or something like that. What are some of the other elements that this impacts? There's of course 2 existing pavilions in the area where we have this consolidated parking, roughly, you know, in here and here. We think those structures seem to be in fine shape. And we were just kind of talking about relocating them to, again, areas where they're more proximic to the other features of the park, more proximic to the water. And again, having to kind of figure out what do we give up as a trade-off? How can we reintegrate some of these important features? I'm sure you're going to have a ton of questions. So I'll try to zip through real quick. Again, the area around the marina we think is a real opportunity for some unique placemaking that allows you to, right now that walkway that goes out to the lighthouse is really the only formal path within the park. So imagine kind of just extending that kind of brings you all along, wraps around the marina. You can soften it with some low maintenance landscape and potentially things like, little pergola front porch swings or something could be nestled within that landscape. We've done those in parks before. And they're always such a great feature, great spot to come and sit and watch the sunset. And really celebrate those incredible vistas that you have out along there. The other thing that we think could be a long-term feature to add would be really celebrating kind of the most dramatic point of this landform, which is really out at this point. So like, from here, you're really getting such spectacular views. We think in the future, if there was implementation funding for some element like this, that some striking architectural feature, whether it's kind of a stretched tensile fabric or something that kind of plays upon kind of the nautical theme of the lake with some big kind of sail looking things, or some kind of unique feature there that on the day-to-day could function like just a beautiful overlook that was kind of a visual icon within the park that kind of celebrated that vista. But when you have events, could be where where you put a performer, and then the pathways would then kind of formalize this green here, which could be kind of the first layer of an event lawn, which on bigger events, could expand, or if you needed more room, you could of course use the area that you currently use. But it's such a special place, having something like that could have a dual function, while still allowing the spectators to have that amazing vista while watching a performance, could be a really cool feature to consider in the long term. Within the RV park, we just simplified. There's lots of kind of vehicular gymnastics going on for them to kind of jockey around. I think we could probably clean up with just a little bit wider of a primary piece here that would allow for the turning movements that are necessary, but then we could reclaim some of that green space and just try to simplify it. That of course would get, all those turning radii, all that stuff would really get worked out as we start to get focused. We did add a bathroom shower facility dedicated for the RV park. For right now, we've kind of nestled it over here where I've circled. And so those are the biggest moves, sort of the consolidation of the parking and the expanded boat trailer access when trying to be in a nice, really efficient lot. And then once you're out of your car, you're out of your car, you're in a safe zone, you've got paths that loop and provide nice accessibility to everything. And the last thing we wanted to mention before I show you kind of a hybrid alternative to this is One other thing that we think is a little bit missing right now within the park. I mean, it's got great amenities throughout. I really think it's about solving that visual and physical disconnect that the vehicles and the parking are causing. But the last thing is, what seems to be missing is sort of a primary open green space. Right now, there's lots of green, but because the tree planting is sort of evenly sporadic, you know, it's kind of, they're sort of just dotted. There's a lot of mature trees, but then some of the younger trees are sort of just sprinkled everywhere. There's no kind of wide open area that you could throw a frisbee or kick a soccer ball around or create sort of secondary. And so, you know, imagine if we just transplanted some of those smaller trees on the edges, you know, you could have a kind of a primary open play zone with lots of big trees on the edges, and then, you know, have secondary and tertiary green spaces that we use the trees to kind of help shape those outdoor rooms. I think all the makings of that are there, just with a few little selective tree transplants, you could kind of create those spaces pretty easily. I don't know, Jackie or Andrew, if you want to answer questions on this one. I know that the other ones will go much faster. This one, there was obviously a pretty dramatic change, so imagine there's lots of questions. I don't know if you want to move on to the alternative first or answer some questions about this one before I do that.
There's a lot of questions that folks are kind of bringing in. I think people might be a little eager, Ian, to provide some comments and ask some questions. So I'm wondering if maybe we can talk about this, and then, you know, the second option might actually address some, you know, some questions, options, or suggestions that are coming in. But yeah, let's open it up to the committee for a little bit and get some initial reactions of this option. And I think as Ian indicated, this is probably the most substantial, dramatic change, if you will. But I think let's turn it over and see what the committee's response is. So yeah, thank you, Ian.
There's been a number of questions posed in the chat log. We could start there just to get everyone warmed up.
Yeah.
So if we were to go up to the top, Deborah asked, why have a high tensile structure when there's a lovely bandstand?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. The gazebo bandstand, it was more the location, Deborah. I was just thinking a way to get, I consider kind of that point to be the most splendid spot of the park. So I thought, you know, from an event standpoint, that would be a way that you could have folks enjoying an event by still taking in kind of the splendor of that unique feature of the landform. But that's a, you know, obviously that bandstand is working just fine. You're just kind of looking for a way to celebrate that, you know, kind of the best view from the park.
And use a structure that is really just a canopy, so it's something you can see through when you're standing on the ground, but it still provides shade and enclosure that can be used for all kinds of different events. The next question, Ian, is there room for boat trailers to maneuver?
Yeah, great.
Walk them through a circulation with the
great question. So the boats would come in, pull up, back in, and then just circulate right into the parking lot. This zone in here is all designed specifically for the boat trailer, so they can pull in and out. Those would be on a 45, and then exit right back out and go back and get their boat before leaving the park.
Then the question of a few tent campsites came up that would support bicycle tourism. That's from Katrina.
Yeah, I think that is something that could potentially be explored. My feeling is the site seems a bit exposed for tent camping. You know, it'd be really wide out in the open. Normally those tend to get nestled into wooded areas a little bit more. But if that's something that folks are really interested in, we can absolutely take a stab at that. I do agree, though, that would create bicycle tourism. So I do agree with that sentiment for sure.
Is there room over by the log cabin to tuck a few in?
Over
On
in
the edge of the
here,
woods, yeah.
yeah, that actually, could be a decent spot for it. If you were to do it, that would be a pretty decent spot for it. So
Doesn't that also link in with the notion of the Blue Way Trail?
Mhm.
People could kayak, stop there, camp overnight.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that idea. We will, if everyone's on board with that, we can absolutely. Is there, how many do you think we should strive for?
5?
Yeah, 5 or 6 could fit into that area tucked on the edge of the
Yeah.
woods.
Okay.
With some buffering from the parking lot, maybe.
Yep.
Some of the small tree removals could create more of
Oh,
an
good
area
one.
around the edge of the parking lot.
Put picnic tables there.
Yep. I think that's a really great idea. It's close proximity to the RV bathroom too, that, they could use that. Yep.
Another question is asking, what about extra parking for events? And we did actually think about that. And one possibility would be to sacrifice on a temporary basis this lawn area here where the RVs camping is, and maybe have a reinforced lawn area, or it's just already compacted and ready for vehicles to park on, like a single day.
That zone certainly could handle a lot.
Katrina said, I would like to see few more trees, tall shade in the parking area. There had been a concept for a more formal pavilion out at the point.
Out here.
Where you're talking about the tensile shade structure, there had in the past been talk of a more formal pavilion that could support weddings and like they have over at Trumansburg, Taganic, but it's not a strong idea. I just wondered if it had been discussed still as part of the options.
Yeah, again, we were trying to think of something that would be really light and airy, that you'd be able to see through, but it would also provide, really a dual purpose. So, someplace you could have a larger performance if you wanted, but on the day-to-day would just be kind of a spot that it was, just a splendid spot to take in the view, and kind of something eye-catching that would sort of pull you from wherever you were in the park kind of out to the
Makes
point.
sense.
But I think, you know, if people in general like the idea of there being some kind of overlook thing there, we can go through a whole exercise to kind of strike the right balance of what that is.
I think originally the concept was around the area of D, that old pavilion is gonna fall down, and would it be nice to replace it with something more aesthetic?
Mhm.
Yeah, I actually think that'd be a better place for a high tensile strength. You still got a lot of views, but people I've seen like to walk out to the point, and there are a lot of birds out there.
Yeah,
Shorebirds, ducks, migrants.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is something that, you know, again, people are already kind of using it as the overlook spot. It was just an idea to kind of really celebrate that spot. But if leaving it like on its own makes more sense, then that's absolutely what should be done. But in general, how does everyone feel in general about the big moves of kind of consolidating the parking and kind of reclaiming the interior and the waterfront piece and reserving it for pedestrians? One thing that we did think would be an interest, you know, one concern we had with this move was, you know, when people are renting the pavilions or using them, you know, they've got coolers and they've got heavy things, and making them carry all that stuff some distance, you know, would that be too much of an inconvenience? We thought an interesting remedy to that would be, you know, maybe we could just have a few kind of open kind of shed roof structures scattered about where we could park some complimentary kind of like nursery cart
Yeah.
carts, you know, have a couple by the parking area, a couple scattered about by the pavilions that are just you know, it's a complimentary thing that the park has, where if you need to use these nice flat paved pathways to get where you need to go, we could, you know, have a simple little cart that you pull to get your stuff there pretty easily.
I like that idea. The duck hunters do that now.
My daughter plays in a travel softball program, so that's like standard equipment you have to haul the gear from field to field, these little folding cart things. So now I can't imagine my life without it, but
Ian, I love it. You and I are very much on the same page. The only question I have is, did you discuss moving the original restroom at any point?
we didn't, we left that there. But you know, if it's at the end of its life, or you think there's a better spot for it, that was more of, you know, just trying to integrate as much as possible. Like, how can we make what's there work? But if that makes sense to pull back into the heart of the park and again free up more lakefront without a structure there, then absolutely we'll figure out how to integrate that, Pat.
It is an older structure. It's been reworked several times, and realistically, it doesn't work anymore. So I would like to see that gone, especially just from the lakeshore. You know, just get it out of there.
Okay.
it might be nice to drop it down kind of north of where the barbecue pit is, sort of in a central area.
Yeah,
Mhm.
near the playground.
Yes, to the,
Yeah,
Like
right where
east
you
of the
here?
right there.
playground.
Yep.
Yep.
Mm.
It would be close to the parking lot, close to the marina, close to everything, right there.
But it's not really blocking any major views from,
No.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect spot.
And
Okay,
is Paddle and More in there?
They are, but I think if we decide to move the kayaks up towards J, they could probably have some sort of structure there that would work for them.
That makes sense.
They really don't
Yeah.
need much. I mean, they don't, they need a small
Yeah.
structure for wetsuits and life jackets and things like that, but they don't need a tremendous spot to work out of.
That would really improve the
Yeah.
point in openness. I mean,
Yes.
that, I think removing the kayaks, and that would create a whole different feel for the end of that park. It'd be
Yep.
beautiful.
I think those are great ideas. You'll see, we know that basketball court is it looks like it's brand new. It's in really good shape. Again, that was just like, man, that is prime real estate.
Yeah, I mean,
Super long term, if there was ever, maybe when that gets to the end of its life or something, again, that's a use that really could get integrated anywhere.
we had that resurfaced 2 years ago, but I honestly hate where it is. It's a terrible
Yeah.
location. I mean, if there's any sort of wind that day, it's not playing basketball anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, to tuck that farther into the park would be a great idea.
okay.
So, yeah, I mean,
Wait.
I originally had put it between the two Ds back in that area, just off the parking lot was my idea.
Yeah.
But where you have it works too. That's been kicked around before also.
Yeah, I mean, and those kind of things, Pat, once you have more time to kind of digest this and
Yeah.
really think it through, you guys know the park a heck of a lot better than we do now. So those kind of specifics, we would certainly, wherever you think they should go, we can figure out a good way to have them represented on the master plan.
Okay. Back to the high tensile structure, whatever it's been kicked around before to do either a pavilion that's partially enclosed there, where D that pavilion is, or an outdoor amphitheater type in that
Mhm.
area. So I'm not opposed to either one of those, but that would kind of take away from the view if you put that there.
What if
I-
you put the
I've seen the-
tensile structure where we're getting rid of the bathroom back there in the middle
You could do that.
and keep the point very open?
Yeah. I mean, that's actually a really interesting idea. Just let that point be how it is, but have something like that where the bathroom is would be really cool. Josiah found a pretty
Yeah.
cool one. I'm gonna show you a picture of it. Now, again, this is sort of the beauty is in the eye of the beholder kind of. That's obviously
Oh, my goodness.
that's a pretty substantial one. But
Wow.
I'll show you one that's in a park. This is not a tensile structure. This is a band shell that also kind of on the day-to-day. This is down in St. Mary's, Georgia. One's it.
Hard to see at night.
That was funny. So same
Whoa.
idea where, you try to have it be on the day-to-day, it's sort of just a nice shaded overlook. It's obviously very substantial, but you've got, you know, big views around it to the water, with a lawn zone. But
I like the profile that reminiscent of a sail.
I like the other one that looks like the Sydney Opera House.
Yeah, that's pretty. Very, it's elegant.
Yeah.
so again, those are obviously really big moves, but I do think they would, you know, something like this could take the park to a whole another level. In this same park in Georgia, it made me think of this, because I do think that these would be great here. So these are just those little trellis swings. They're just front porch swings with a little kind of pergola on the top. These are the most popular features in this park.
Oh, yeah.
So every night, folks kind of, it's first come, first serve, and they all kind of race to see if they can get to those and watch the sunset.
Big enough for grown-ups?
Yeah, that's
I
right.
like, I like the concept. I like something a little less federal or
Oh, yeah,
the
this would,
top of it's
Southern.
pretty intense,
It
you know,
would-
something a little more,
it would
little more
be,
Blur your
country.
eyes.
yeah, it would be more of the place for sure, not not St. Mary's, Georgia, for sure.
Yeah,
But just keep in mind the use, I do think would be a neat feature.
it's way more comfortable than the marble benches.
Well, why don't I
Ian,
jump to the
Yeah,
next
yeah, go ahead.
concept?
Let's.
And because it's basically this concept with a little bit of a hybrid. And so in this concept, we said, what if we didn't completely consolidate all the parking? We still handled all of the boat storage with 120 cars, 75 boat trailers still over here. But we pulled 60 cars over here. This is again part of the existing road now. We would still do the little drop off and then just have a single loaded area to park. It doesn't take up that much green space, but it sort of saves this zone of those big cottonwoods. And
I like that too.
You mean the campsites?
To preserve a little woods area.
yeah, it
Huh.
preserves that a little bit more. You know, the downsides of it is it, you know, it would create a little wall of cars there, you know, most of all the, but, you know, all of the amenities would still be able to be accessed without crossing a vehicular use area, with the exception of getting back to the RV park. And of course, the RV park would have to be looking through that across their green, but in general, it's a bit of a compromise. They both, I think, have pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, we're netting zero with the car count, with the idea that we can plan for event parking on some of the secondary green spaces. But basically, we're increasing the boat storage by 50, and we're netting out roughly the same amount of cars as what's there today. And all of the other, everything else is the same, but we wanted to have a little bit of a variation that, you know, maybe tried to save this piece with and still end up with accommodating the same amount of cars.
Can I ask a question about the camper area?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a lot of them in here. Does that still preserve some space for them to have picnic tables, or is it just pretty tight wall of campers there?
I can speak to that. So we actually somehow put one extra RV campsite in there. And they each have 20 feet in between each parking stall.
Oh, okay.
So there's 20 RV campsites with 20 feet in between each.
That's pretty comfortable.
So, again, I think matter of kind of weighing out the pros and cons on these two options. I think in some ways we like option one in its kind of purity of this is where all the parking is and everything else is non-parking. But I think you can make some arguments for saving this zone as well, particularly if we wanted to add in some tent camping there. The other thing that we should mention, to be considered, this zone along the creek, we believe this bank could probably use some naturalized planting zone to kind of just keep it in good order. It'd be good for the habitat and water quality, with penetrations for access points. And then the other thing that we would probably want to start to consider as we zoom in would be stormwater, and what are some ways we can account for that. In some ways, the master plan is obviously by giving all of the roads a big diet, reclaiming a lot of the pavement around the marina. We're reducing pavement, but obviously then we're adding a lot back into consolidated parking areas, and we can talk through whatever all the options could potentially be there, from porous asphalts to rain gardens and bioswales to more conventional stormwater practices with, depending on soil conditions, we would kind of know what our options are to plan for. But I think that could be kind of the next layer of zooming in. Any questions before we move on to the next park area?
So
There's
just
another-
a couple of quick things, Ian. Josiah, I don't know if you just saw what just came in from the Parks and Rec Department. It looks like option one is getting a vote there, and then there is and also from Katrina, and then there is the question about handicap accessibility, and I think one of the key elements in formalizing where pedestrian access and circulation is in either of these options is making sure that everything is accessible to the greatest extent possible. And quite honestly, I think, shifting the discussion from the committee today, shifting the bathrooms to a more centrally located area, that certainly will all be taken into consideration. And, as we talk about this through the plan and into the design aspects for next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it would be from an accessibility standpoint, the master plan would literally be, it'd be 100% increase in accessibility to all of the different amenities, as well as just I think the ability for not just disabled folks, but just folks of all ages and abilities to safely get to everything within the park, with a lot less worry. I know there was the woman in my group at the public workshops who talked about, you know, how wonderful it would be if she could sort of be able to jog around the park while her youngster was, you know, riding their bike. And I think if we could achieve that, you know, then we, as a way to get access to everything, you know, we'd be really hitting a home run. All right, Jackie, you want me to move on to Salt Point?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, let's go.
Oh,
ahead
we're
and-
actually going to the ball fields next.
Oh, you mean Ludlow?
All right, so this one should be hopefully a lot more straightforward. I think it's going to just be a graphic representation of a lot of the ideas that we have talked about. The one area that I think is worth discussing a little deeper is this entry parking here. This zone it's only about 53 feet wide. So a standard double loaded parking tray is 60 feet wide. So it must feel really crammed when, you know, when that is full. I don't know if it's actually being utilized as a double loaded lot. And the other question I had for everyone is, does this zone of it, that's right, and I forgot the fire pavilion, but is this zone of it utilized during, you know, when there's a game on this field? Because that is prime foul ball territory.
Yes, it is, and we've had lots of cars hit.
Yeah.
Sort of what we thought.
It happens on a
This
nightly
area is
basis.
not parking there, right?
Yeah. The smart people don't park there, but there's always somebody that does.
Yeah. Why is no one parking in this perfect spot? All right, well, so that was an area we took a look at and tried to make a little bit of what we thought might be something to consider. So just keep that in mind. We'll get to that. The other things that you'll see, you know, we talked about creating kind of a primary loop down the spine, as well as a, you know, a secondary loop, as well as trying to link the library and the community center more safely to the park, as well as look for opportunities to expand some of the parking. We know that parking is really at a premium. So with that being said, I will just jump to the plan. So the big idea here, create a loop trail system around really the whole of the park, organized by this central spine. The existing bathroom facility and storage area, a maintenance area, you know, that's fine how it is. What we were just showing is if ever there was an addition to that bathroom facility, like a concession building, anything like that, it might be nice to just somehow make it work along that primary spine. It's literally centrally located, so it seems it would be like a nice organizing element in the future if ever that were to happen. These two parking areas that come in over here, right now, those are both single loaded, so they just have parking on one side with a drive aisle. So by simply adding 18 feet to each of those, which you have the room for, we can double the parking there. So we made that's all we did with those, and that doubled those lots. As you can see, the loop path kind of meanders around and then finds ways to cross and connect back to the trail. we look for opportunities within the existing parking lot to be able to hop over to the sidewalk system to then have nice kind of safe connectors back to the loop system to be able to link those two assets to the park. And then again, we gained, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm going to say, let's, for the sake of the discussion, say we gained 32 spaces over here. What we did up here was, with that existing width, it's really more suitable to a one-way drive aisle with some diagonal parking. Maybe we could install just a higher kind of foul ball netting. We might get up to 25 feet or something, and we would eliminate that access point and just be able to pop it out, which I'm imagining DOT wouldn't mind separating the distance between those 2 points. But we could cross that bridge a little bit later. But what that enabled us to do is reclaim some real estate and get a walkway that could run along the outside of the fence, on the outside of that firehouse pavilion, and then around the backside. So then we really do get a complete loop where that existing parking area would create a gap. This would allow us to really finish off that loop around the entire thing. And then let's see, what else am I missing, Josiah? We talked about the potential for a mid-block crossing aligned with that central spine that could get us over to the greater trail system. And then I think the last thing really was more of a maintenance thing. I'm imagining that's kind of a pain for you guys. This older equipment here that's in those isolated rectangles that you're probably having to be careful mowing around. And, you know, when those get to the end of their life and if you do replace it, you know, maybe just have one that's consolidated and just a little easier to deal with. But we think it's a perfect location, obviously. So so that's really the key pieces for this guy. So I don't know if there's any questions in the chat, but we can open it up to any comments or feedback that you have. Is that the location where the current
Yeah, there's
crossing?
gonna, yeah, that's gonna go in the spring. There's gonna be a
Okay.
crosswalk
Great.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so we could do something like, you know, we could lose a little bit more parking since we've added some here and then have it cross, or we could try to figure out a way to stay on this side of the ditch
Okay,
and extend it down. But we can work on trying to get it to that spot, Pat.
okay.
Pat, is there any way to grab a little of Woods Edge land so we can extend parking down along that southern border? Because I know the parking along the drive is not the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be easy to do, you know, especially, let me grab this again. Especially in this area here, you could probably
Exactly.
add more cars pretty
Mhm.
easily.
That would be great.
Yep.
Hey,
from
and
a
isn't there
standpoint.
there's a little connection there? There's a little path.
Yes, there is a path that comes out right about here.
From it, there's a little loop around
There
the
is a
Woods
connection
Edge
to Woods
building.
Edge right there.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, yeah.
So
Well, that's cool. All right, we can show that too.
Who lives at Woods Edge?
It's senior housing.
Oh, that'll be a great connection then.
So yeah, I mean, I like everything on here. I don't have any objections to any of this. like what we've already discussed about consolidating the playground and taking more of that for parking. So, I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head with this one too.
Great. Yeah, so Pat, if we just figure out how to get the trail connection over to that crosswalk, that would be the big move, and then we can add the parking down here. We'll show this spur connection. Anything else?
I think that's it for me. I mean, everything else looks pretty good.
So that parcel to the south is owned by Town of Lansing Housing Authority. So that shouldn't be
That's an easy
Okay.
acquisition.
too.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I see the parcel line there. I don't want you
Yeah.
to worry about, oh, are we deciding we're gonna fill in someone else's property?
Okay.
But there is that area you have shaded there is, it is a little there's some topo going on there, kind of for that new proposed parking lot. I mean, I don't think it'd be impossible to deal with, but
No, it's not. It's not too severe.
just figured I'd mention the ownership piece.
The one other thing that we were thinking about that I know it was someone from my group was wondering if there was a spot we could find to integrate an ice rink that wouldn't take away any ball fields or other program areas. So I was trying to keep that in the back of my mind. One thing I thought about was, some places that do sort of just a simple wood edger with a membrane. Maybe in the winter time, you could take this lot and try that. It'd be a nice central location. You don't have the parking demand that you have in the other seasons. But that might be a spot to consider that.
Yeah, they want an outdoor ice rink. Is that the
Yeah.
conversation? Okay.
Yeah. Well, the comment came because in her neighborhood, I think they had
Oh, yes.
a retention area that the kids, with COVID were playing hockey all winter, and
the town shut them out of there, and it did not go over very well with a lot of people. Yeah,
No liability to
that
that.
was a touchy subject around here for a while, but yeah. So now, okay, I got you. I know where that came from now.
Okay, all right, that's where that came.
But yeah, I mean, it would be an awesome thing to add. It really would. A maintenance headache, but
A
yeah.
maintenance headache, yeah, for sure. Okay, well, great. Well, I will clear this.
Ian, while you're pulling up the next one, I just want to point out, the supervisor indicated in the chat to connect with the housing authority about availability for future use. And yeah, I think that would definitely need to happen from a partnership perspective. Supervisor, if you're seeing this, I think Katrina just volunteered you for that.
I have no problem. I have no problem doing that. It's I used to be on the Lansing Housing Authority before I became a council person, before I became supervisor, and they have been approached in the past for other land by the driving range, and they turned it down. Now I don't know if this snippet, shall we say, would be something that they would be willing to do. But I could reach out if you want me to, or somebody else could. I know Dave Storiello very well. He's the president of Lansing Housing Authority now. If you want me to make the initial contact, if not, if you want to do it later, that's fine with me. Or if somebody else wants to do it, that's fine also. So whatever you choose to do, I will help in any way. And as CJ would say, P.S., these are all excellent ideas. So thank you so much for doing this.
So I think, you all know the lay of the land a little bit better than we do. I think it would be helpful to have some understanding of whether or not the housing authority would be open to this before any of this gets presented publicly, and we're showing parking on their property. I think that the mechanics of how that works, if it's purchased or perhaps there's an easement agreement in place, whatever might work best for that, certainly can happen further out into the future. But I think that for the purposes of our concept planning, it would be helpful to kind of at least test the water with the housing authority in terms of this is an idea that we're thinking about as we're moving forward. And if it's a non-starter, that'd be good to know. But if there's an opportunity to have a partnership, recognizing this is at a master plan level and kind of how that all gets implemented is to be determined. My opinion is that if supervisor, you can have that initial conversation, that would be helpful. But I would defer, probably CJ to you and Pat about what your thoughts are as well about that.
Well, I'll be more than happy to work with them if he gave some specifics. I know these were initial thumb sketches, but if they were somewhat more specific as far as here's option 1, option 2, option 3 for them to consider, and maybe it's just bumping out that one area. That's it. I don't know. But I can sit down with Pat and CJ and talk about this if they think it's appropriate and when they think it's appropriate, if they decide to. It's all workable.
Yeah, like Katrina just said, that's a lovely amenity and connection, to keep that connection going to the senior housing there, and just have it be, even more welcoming. Anything that we can do to kind of encourage that. I do the loop frequently, and so I see a lot of seniors just even in the past week, coming from Woods Edge over to enjoy the town lands, and anything that would help make that more accessible as well, I think would be great. And yeah, I think because we're not talking about emplacement of any kind of permanent structure, I mean, it's really just some parking. I don't see, any significant hurdles to some kind of easement agreement. So.
Well, one thing I would recommend is that is whoever sits down with Lansing Housing Authority is that they're having some concerns with people walking in their backyard, and perhaps we can do a partnership and put a path that might go behind their property over to Cuba Vista Drive, because people walk over to the Dollar General. And maybe we can do a shared services, so to speak. We can get this land if we help you put a path or a trail in over there and guide people so they're not walking in their backyard. These are all things obviously that are subject to change, but also something to talk about as one hand washes the other.
Very good. Yeah.
It's a great idea. Just one thing came to mind, before us designers can, show what any kind of parking looks like. I mean, we would just want to know how much parking is really needed, right? So we've got 97 parking stalls in this design before you. How many more do you really need? And if we had that target number, then we could show graphically what that could mean.
On any given night, we have between 200 to close to 300 kids here. So, I mean,
Wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, we need more parking. There's no,
Okay.
there's no question about it.
And please keep in mind that the more parking we can put there, the less pressure we can take off of our partners, which are the library, because they are always a squeeze for parking up there.
Yeah.
Somehow as we change these traffic patterns so they come behind there, once we get more light in there for visual security, amongst other things, and once we start to change traffic patterns, even employees can start to park in the back. And that would free up a little bit more parking from the town property for the library, because as Pat has clearly stated in the past, just look at the attendance for our park last year. And I suspect that once people are ready to congregate again, there'll be an explosion of activity. And one more thing, as PS, as CJ would say, you have paths and trails you're trying to create, not only Woods Edge, but that one that you mentioned earlier. I think it used to be called Egan's at one time, didn't it, Pat? Wasn't it intended for that? The one that,
Yeah,
that goes,
so originally there was a trail from Woods Edge all the way along the back two parking lots you have here, behind the town hall, and then down to, yep, you got it.
We
There
saw
was a
that.
trail there originally, so this all kind of puts that back into place almost.
it might
So
be
we may want to
residential.
look at getting easements to put that trail back in once, hopefully there's something happening on the corner here. very
Well,
soon.
on the aerial, you can really see
Yeah,
that there was something there.
Yep.
Okay. Sure. Which, so should we show that, Pat, like kind of running off the page there?
yeah,
As
just
potential
exactly,
Future extension?
yep.
Okay.
And I mean, CJ, maybe you could look into see, or we can talk to Guy if those easements still exist. I don't know if they do or not.
That's a good question.
And as you go, once again, if you're talking about paths and trails, as you're going down to, let's say, Egan's, as I'm going down memory lane here, you connect that trail. As you go onto East Shore, how much area do you have that you're going to have to get easements to put a sidewalk or something in besides the Munson property, which is the first one there? The rest of it, I think, is business. There isn't much residential on that one side, and you almost be able to connect over to Cuba Vista, and you can loop around. And you'd almost have a solid loop there without much activity, except perhaps to get the Munson easement. And I don't know if there's another house. I think there's only one there on East Shore. As you turn on the East Shore on the same side as the Rogues Harbor, going towards Ithaca. That might be an easy loop to actually connect.
Well, that would be great.
I realize I'm the liaison and should be quiet, but sometimes there's moments somewhat productive.
These are really great ideas.
Yeah, this is helpful. Thank you.
All right, off the Salt Point?
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, this one, the bulk of our focus really was, oh, sorry. Was really in this zone with how kind of the vehicle again is impacting kind of that, potentially taking up some valuable real estate. So right now we've got the small trailhead parking here, the secondary parking lot or area over in this zone. This is really kind of got boulders keeping folks out of it with a little bit of an opening that I imagine. I think we learned that, and sometimes folks find their way in there with when things get really busy.
No.
That is overflow parking.
Okay. You know, and just the shape of that obviously can't get super efficient, especially with the one way in and way out. So we wanted to see if there was a way, again, we could give back as much lakefront zone just to be kind of part of the reserve or part of the natural area, and just make a little bit of adjustment to the parking that we think we could accomplish both of those things. You know, right now when Josiah and I were there, we saw a lot of folks kind of picnicking in this lawn area, and then all of this was kind of cars, real thick tree line here that maybe with just like leaving the trees in place and with some proper selective clearing, maybe this sort of grass experience before you get into like the meat of the natural area could work, and then we could kind of reconfigure this zone to be a little bit more efficient. The other thing I want to say is we know that there's sort of a sweet spot we want to hit with the efficiency, but also limiting how many folks can be there. We think that the parking is really the key to that. Whatever the number is that you want, we control it through the size of the parking lot, and just don't let it get any bigger, you know, so with that being said, I'll jump to the proposed plan. So as you can see, we basically, as the entry drive comes in, we had it loop around with a single loaded parking zone into a double loaded and then just an exit out. That achieves 64 spots, which I think is quite a bit more than what's accommodated there for, I mean, there's a lot of kind of unofficial parking that's hard to account for, but I think we've netted an increase. But I guess back to the point is we can make that smaller if you only want there to be 50 or you only want there to be 40. We can make it whatever size it needs to be. But what this does is it takes back this zone so that, you know, we're not giving that away to the car, and it lets it become kind of this this first experience that you get before you kind of enter the trail system, and really enter the you know, it's up against the railroad tracks. So trying to, again, find a spot that we wouldn't consider the premium real estate and trying to make it as efficient as possible. The only other, we formalized the kind of fishing access parking lot on the other side of the tracks here. Again, that trail system, I think now it's more like a mode path, if from a maintenance standpoint, if it made sense to use a more long-term material to provide access over to the creek, we could do that. The only other thing in the natural area, and Josiah, feel free to jump in whenever, I'll go back to the existing condition for just a second. You know, this part, sorry. This part's pretty interesting as you're winding around and you have all these great little spur connections to this little beach and all around here. Once you get to this point and this part of the preserve is kind of straight as an arrow and it's really wide. So you kind of experience the whole thing in that stretch all at once because you just can see all the way to the end. And because it's so wide, it's letting a lot of light in, which lets that edge condition growth of the woods fill in and basically become a thicket. So you don't really get to see the beauty of the woods until you take these like secondary and tertiary paths, which are a lot narrower and don't allow the same amount of light in. And that's when you kind of get to see those little micro ecosystems that are within that nature area. So the only real thing that we're proposing in this zone would be if you wanted to, let me go back to the plan, is maybe just let this bottom path here just kind of weave in and out of those woods a little bit, and then, you know, potentially have a few creekside access points off of it, and it just might make that part as interesting as the other trails provided in the natural area. Josiah, anything you want to add to that, or did I cover it?
Sorry, I was reading the chat log.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered the thing about the paths, Ian. I think that there could be some more intentionality or management of the edge, because people are going to go, particularly near letter D here, people are going to want to access the water. So that can have destructive impact on the lake edge depending on the access. So sometimes rather than fighting human nature to just open that and allow people to get in there and reinforce it in an elegant way is good to do. You know, and in terms of trails, you know, something that we discovered only later, you know, there's this, you know, this natural area is much bigger than you might assume, and we didn't get a chance to explore this upper acreage, but depending on the town's interests and perhaps even the adjacent neighbors' interests, connecting this path here with something along the railroad that goes up into the woods and loops back could be interesting, but we didn't show that graphically here.
And Josiah, if you could talk a little bit about what's happening on the other side of the railroad where you did show a little more formalized area. I know that our understanding is there's been a different mind or different frames of thought, if you will, with regard to that space, but we did show you know, increased access to the creek from that particular location. And so I'm curious to get, Josiah, if you can explain that a little bit more. I'm curious to get any input from the committee about that.
Sure. So, I mean, this beach, I believe, is a popular place to fish. It's where people want to go. This currently is fortified by, I guess not where the parking is, but it's fortified by pile dividing blocks to keep people's cars where they should be. And so what this plan really shows is actually allowing this sort of faint yellow to revert into meadow, which I think is already in progress. And that this path, depending on the level or the topography there, potentially making a more formalized path, something a little more permanent, whether it be stone dust or a wood chip path that doesn't have to get mowed all the time in order to keep the meadow back, but would still allow people who park at this location to make their way down to the river. And then once they're down to the river in this beach, to then, you know, have access upstream.
Thanks, Josiah. So it looks like there's a handful of comments coming in, particularly with regard to, I think, concerns with overcrowding of this area. And this certainly we heard, I think all of us heard that in our groups for the public engagement as well. So yeah, some thoughts about controlling, limiting the number of parking stalls perhaps. And this is good feedback for us, you know, from a design perspective. What are some other comments?
Pat, is the biggest pressure during hunting and certain parts of fishing season when there's the most vehicular pressure?
No. So
Okay.
really hunting is not really an issue at all, because there's very few. And I think at some point we're going to talk to the DEC so we can have more control of that out of our office. But this is a huge attraction, because it's free to get in and out of, right? So this summer it was overpopulated at times and people were just parking everywhere. It became a mess. There was people trespassing because obviously the railroad people, those tracks attract people to walk up and down, and really there's no more train traffic that goes to the north, so people were walking it more often, and residents didn't like it, unfortunately, but you know, there's really no control that they have over it. So from my standpoint, this is great because we need to control the parking. The parking down there is terrible. We just need to have a better handle on it, just and make it more defined. So you know, to me, 36 to 40 cars is ideal. That
Okay.
kind of controls the number of people and kind of limits the number of people that can be there at one time. So, and I mean, you have all these fingers coming off that go to the north to the lake. We have to keep that sort of overgrown in spots for hunters because that's part of the DEC
Part of
agreement.
it,
So,
yeah.
you know, we're kind of limited as to what we can do there. But I mean, I would like to see a little bit more access there, and what you have along the creek, I like that. And I do agree with you. You can come across the railroad tracks and then you just see this big corridor that runs straight to the lake. It just, to me, it doesn't look great. It could be done better. So I like your ideas. Then
I think
even out
oh,
front,
sorry, Pat.
no,
Go ahead.
out front. Yeah, I agree with you, Josiah. I would love to do away with those concrete blocks at some point, and that's our goal, is to kind of get that to grow back up into a, you know, overgrown meadow, so to speak, and you know, I would like to see maybe 2 formalized trails going down to the creek for fishermen to go down. And you know, we have our day camp runs over there and does some nature walks and does some certain things, and even our camps for paddling more, they go over there and do certain things. So yeah, a couple more formalized paths to the creek from that side would be great.
You know, I was just going to add something just about the circulation, because I saw in the comments, you know, people like to, you know, drop their boats off. You know, we actually accounted for that. So we're just at a very big scale here. So things are very small, but if you were driving up with your boat, you could pull into this turnout here with then a bypass lane to allow cars behind you to then park. And so theoretically you could unload your boat here, park, bring your boat over to this put in and enter the lake. And then another thing that was not mentioned, but is important, is letter A. We suggest a shelter for the porta-john, and maybe even a second shelter for a second porta-john. And that would be essentially a platform with a shed roof and maybe some lattice walls, three walls, that sort of make it look less like a porta-john than it is. But having them there would then mean that a truck could service them pretty easily.
Yep.
So I just wanted to make sure that that got into everybody's focus. And we did end up moving the kiosk, which is somewhere around here, and we put it here into a more central location, which could then maybe offer some expanded interpretive signage or historic markers and placards.
Just in your experiences, what have you guys seen as a buffer for parking, so people don't pull onto certain areas? Like there's concrete blocks or telephone poles, or what have you guys seen in your past projects that you guys might use for buffering that sort of stuff?
I mean, we just did a project in the Catskills that they had boulders along an area, and it, you know, they were just sort of like they dumped them out of the back of a truck. They weren't like nestled into the landscape or anything.
Right.
But we just did a fairly tight tree planting along the edge of where we were trying to go. Now that's still something you got to maintain around, and so it wasn't necessarily making it a ton easier, but we could think through some different options there. We agreed that, so we think trees would, you know, in strategic places could be done, but maybe it's in combination with some other things, so that we're kind of every possible place where you would want to, like, oh, if I could just sneak through there, I could go park in the lawn.
Right.
We can like look for ways to cut that off with a combination of things. Instead of it just being one treatment, maybe it's several that makes it look a little more cohesive. And but I think we can accomplish that for sure.
And I think we, you know, based on what some of the things you just mentioned, Ian, we'd want to try to keep that natural aesthetic with anything that's introduced particularly in this park. And I see some of the comments with regard to DEC. We certainly want to make sure that you know, that coordination happens with DEC, and we can talk, you know, later about when that happens. Because we don't want to introduce something that they're not going to be receptive to, clearly, but we do want to, you know, try to create a space here that is, you know, balancing this as a preserve and recognizing that, you know, there's a lot of people that are coming here, and how do you manage that without losing what makes this so special?
I think I just want something that looks more natural, because obviously the concrete barriers we have now just don't look natural, and they're just out of place. Even the railroad ties that are there are out of place. They just don't look right.
All right, well,
I'm sorry,
as we start to zoom in, Pat, we'll make that one of the things we really think through at a more detailed level.
All right.
Right. All right, other ideas? So Ian, what do you think should we just move on to the quick highlights of some of the other parks at this point, and then hit on next steps? We've lost some of our committee members, I know, but
yeah, that makes sense. I think, you know, sounds like, you know, we're on the right track with a lot of things, and we got some good feedback that we can make some little tweaks. But you know, before our next step again would be to try to zoom in a little bit more, and then graphically bring it into the computer. Once it's in the computer, then it becomes that much easier for us to make edits. And, you know, it'll obviously be easier to, you know, it'll be a more refined graphic for everyone to understand.
Great. Thanks, Ian, Josiah, for walking us through that. So we're going to take back the.
I'll stop share.
There we go. And so while Andrew's pulling, yeah, I think that's, yeah. We're going to share our screen again, and have this. All right. So I wanted to thank everybody for your input and comments on this. I know it's a lot to digest, but if you have additional thoughts after, you know, you've had a chance to kind of think through this a little bit, please let us know. This is, you know, the first cut, if you will, based on what we've heard collectively through all of the conversations we've had with the community and all of you so far. We started with these 3 parks because these really had the most substantial elements that we were, you know, proposing as part of, you know, the future improvements. But we do obviously recognize that there are other parks that you have, and so we wanted to just highlight some of the elements that we are thinking about for these other parks. These aren't quite as complicated, to be quite honest with you, in terms of some of those elements and some of the improvements. So the level of detail that we will be going into from a conceptual graphic standpoint will not be as significant for these, just to point that out to you. But we will be, you know, identifying some of these key elements. And for Ludlowville Park, I think we really heard some, from the public input. It's really about some, I'm going to say, smaller improvements to what's there, not dramatically increasing, parking, et cetera, but reshaping parking a little bit, restrooms, thinking about safer access to the falls, and thinking about longer term, those opportunities for expansion north of Salmon Creek, and then the better connections to the existing neighborhoods in some way. So those are some of the high level points that are taking shape for Ludlowville Park. For the Lansing Center Trail, again, parking improvements and slight expansion in restrooms. You're seeing a theme with some of these improvements. Again, opportunities on neighboring parcels and that connections piece. The idea of possibly expanding trails, and then the interpretive signage, helping people to understand what a resource this is and what's available there from a habitat perspective and a wildlife perspective. And then with regard to the town barn field, this one, quite honestly, this was the least amount of improvements, what we were hearing from the community, but still an opportunity to maybe create a space that's utilized more in this particular location. So again, a little more formalized parking, possibility of restrooms, creating better pedestrian safety connections, a better space for pedestrians. The opportunity really exists here for utilizing this as what we're calling flex space, flexible recreation space. The idea of protective fencing along the roadway here, so if balls get loose, there's something that's stopping them and the kids from running into the street. And this could be an opportunity for some additional, introducing additional amenities here, again, to create a more utilization of this space, whether it's playground, a picnic area, or a small pavilion in the corner close to the roadway there. So these are some of the high level improvements that we're thinking about for these additional parks. And we just wanted to let you know that we're continuing to think through that. Our intention is to continue with those three parks, continue to refine the concepts for Salt Point, the ball fields, and for Myers Park based on the input today, and any additional input that you continue to share with us. And then we are also going to continue with some of these other tasks, the existing plans, the existing conditions. We will follow up with the stakeholders that we haven't had the opportunity to speak to. And ultimately, we want to regroup with you in April. So that would be the April 27th, and share with you the refined plans, share with you the high-level concepts for the barn fields, the Lansing Center trails, and Ludlowville Park. Totally just had a blank. Sorry about that.
Now you forget it.
I know, now we forget it. And what we're hoping to do at that April meeting with all of you is come to a point where this group is comfortable enough for us to present these ideas and concepts to the public and talk about that next round of public engagement, which we're hoping can take place sometime the end of May or perhaps early June, depending on the timing of that. And depending on, quite honestly, if there are other community activities going on that we might be able to piggyback with to maximize participation. I heard there happens to be, is it a Friday night barbecue? And so maybe we can show up with a pop-up, the barbecue night and take advantage of that. But that's what we're thinking in terms of next steps. But we want to make sure that as a committee, you're comfortable with what we're presenting. So we want to regroup back here in April. and then move forward from there. So that's what we have for today. Any other thoughts, comments, ideas that you wanted to share with us today? Okay. So I think that's it. I don't know if you want to stop sharing. Yeah, that's what we have, folks. That's all she wrote.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you guys for the great feedback.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, we really appreciate it. And it's fun from our perspective to kind of start seeing this come together.
It's great from our perspective to see it all come together. I mean, these are thoughts we've had for quite a while, so very happy.
Very cool.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Enjoy
Thanks.
that sunshine today, guys.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you all.
Everybody.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye.